Lake water hushes beneath a quilt of stars as an old name rises like mist. A road of feathers and flint gathers itself from memory and begins to move. Tonight, we journey into the story of the Aztecs. You arrive in a valley held by mountains, where lakes lie like sheets of obsidian, and the air carries the scent of wet tule reeds and wood smoke. Dawn loosens a pale ribbon across the eastern ridge. Canoes slide through a lace of reflected clouds. From islands of marsh grass, you hear rattling birds and the soft slap of water on roots. Far off, stone pyramids of earlier peoples glow with old fire, and trails wind over passes that know the tread of countless feet. The land feels ancient and watchful, and though you walk gently, you sense how fierce a people must be to shape a home from water and rock. You might struggle to endure what they once lived through. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story begins not in this valley, but in a place remembered as shimmering and far, a cradle called Aztlan. You walk inside the memory as if it were a night market of stars. A wind of story lifts the cotton capes and rattles the feather standards. The people carry a sacred bundle wrapped in woven cloth. The bundle holds the heart of their god, a fire that speaks in dreams. They call themselves Mexica. They speak in Nahuatl, and their words are full of water and stone and breath. At the edge of that first water, they watch the sky for a sign. When the sign does not come, they lift their homes onto their backs and step forward. You move along with them through dry riverbeds, across thorn plains where the earth wears a crust of dust that cracks under sandals. Each night, the priests place the bundle on a bed of reeds. Smoke rises from copal resin and tastes of pine and honey. The warriors sit in a ring around the fire, obsidian points catching the light. The women grind maize on stone and sing old verses that recall flowers and jade, life's fragility and its brightness. The songs carry the people over hard ground when feet blister and supplies thin. A drum keeps time with the walking heart of the god they serve. Sometimes the path crosses other towns. Sometimes it crosses silence. You pass shrines made by earlier hands, stones placed to catch dawn, hills whose names are lost under new names. The Mexica offer gifts, ask permission to pass, and learn the temper of the Basin of Mexico, where lakes spread like mirrors and volcanoes stand like guardians. In the high air, you taste the mineral tang of springs and the ash of old eruptions. The sun is fine and cold. The nights gather close. In the folds of the journey, you hear how meaning is stitched. The bundle is more than relic. It is a portable axis that turns the tribe toward a future promise to them. Huitzilopochtli, hummingbird on the left, is not only war and heat, but direction and rhythm. The priests observe owls, corn tassels, smoke trails. Your steps keep time with omens. In the morning light, a heron lifts from reeds, and a path seems to unroll from its wings. In the afternoon, a dust devil dances across a salt flat, and the elders pause as if listening to a sentence inside the wind. There is hardship that changes the face and deepens the eyes. Some towns reject you. Some welcome you as mercenaries, for the Mexica have a fierce reputation with the Tlatelolco and the Macuahuitl. You take service where you can, trading strength for food and shelter, learning the customs and rivalries of the valley's older powers. The Tepanecs watch from Azcapotzalco, the Acolhua rule at Texcoco, and smaller polities knit the shores with alliances and grudges. The Mexica adapt, sometimes pressed into swamps and badlands that others do not want, places that teach them to make more out of less. The lakes become your map. Saltocancan flashes with birds. Xochimilco, later full of floating gardens, is still a tangle of reeds. You notice how water makes walls where there is no stone, how causeways can turn marsh to road, how the lake can be farm if you learn its patience. The people mark camps with garlands and chalk images on rock, small offerings to local rain lords and earth mothers so that new soil will recognize their steps. A child's rattle made of gourd passes from hand to hand and sounds like a future festival in a city not yet born. Where Aztlan lies is a path that does not end. Some say it lived far to the northwest, where rivers cut through canyons and shells come up from a warmer sea. Some hear it in an island across hard blue water. Some find it in the mind, a name for origin that cannot be pointed to on any map because origin is a direction the heart remembers rather than a place the feet can return to. As you walk, you feel how the homeland moves with the people like a steady drumbeat, how memory becomes a sail that carries a boat across unknown lakes. The trail narrows to a ribbon along a ridge where the grass whispers and the valley opens below like a cupped hand. Smoke from distant hearths lifts in thin columns. You can almost read the pattern of tribes by the colors of their banners and the sound of their flutes in the evening. The Mexica descend toward the water, urged by visions of an eagle and cactus, a sign of arrival that waits somewhere among the islands. They skirt fields built by others, step around boundary stones, and accept small humiliations from those who think them rough newcomers with nothing to claim. Facts gather around you like sparks from a hearth. In time, the Mexica will found Tenochtitlan on an islet in Lake Texcoco around the early 14th century. They will bind reeds and mud to make chinampas and pull harvests from water. They will raise a Templo Mayor, double-hearted for Huitzilopochtli and Tlaloc. Yet those scenes are still folded ahead, and what holds you here is the feel of beginning, of a people who have walked long and still believe the road itself is a ceremony. Night settles. The priests murmur over the bundle. The wind smells of salt and wet earth. A flute finds a low melody that sounds like water lifting in reeds. You lie down on a mat of woven rush and feel the lake breathe under the dark. A star falls behind the shoulder of a volcano and leaves a soft line of brightness in your thoughts. You understand why they carry songs alongside weapons, why they guard memory with the same care as fire. In the morning, you will rise and move again. You will test the shallows and the islands. You will read the flight of birds and the shape of clouds, and somewhere the sign will appear, and a city will begin to grow out of water. For now, rest inside the hush before arrival. The mountains stand like old teachers. The lakes listen without hurry. The bundle sleeps. The people gather their strength. The road of feathers and flint becomes a quiet thread that pulls you forward through the dark, gentle, and steady, toward a place that will ask everything and give everything back as a name that still carries across centuries. You rise with the mist and follow a thin strand of land into water bright as polished obsidian. Reed beds shiver. Herons stand like carved ivory. The Mexica move in careful lines, their burdens balanced, their songs quiet enough to honor the spirits that dwell in the shallows. Before you, the lake opens into a web of islets and mudflats, places that look flimsy at first glance, yet hold a promise that sturdier ground has refused. You step where others fear to step, and your sandals taste the silt of a future city. Stories gather on the morning air. The Mexica remembers service under Culhuacan, the old prestige city with lineages that claimed Toltec shine. They remember an alliance that turned bitter, a sacred rite that turned the stomachs of their hosts, anger slamming shut doors that had only begun to open. With spears hunting their heels, they fled into the water country, into reeds and wet earth, into a geography that could not easily be seized by horse or foot. You can still feel the throb of that flight in the soles of your feet. You breathe the safe chill of the lake, and you know why people become islands when the land refuses to accept them. The priests carry the sacred bundle through rippling reflections. Offerings float like tiny boats, petals, maize, copal coals winking like embers on a night road. The people kneel on mats woven of tulle. They whisper names to the lake so that the lake will say those names back when storms come. You listen to the water's slow, strong exhale. In your chest, steady as a drum, the hope of arrival becomes a kind of warmth. Then you see it. On a stone shouldered up from the shallows, a prickly pear cactus lifts its spined arms into blue. At its crown, an eagle spreads powerful wings, sun washing its feathers with gold. The bird's talons grip the living cactus, and a hush goes through the people like wind through reeds. A warrior drops to one knee. A child clutches a mother's mantle and forgets to breathe. The omen stands in absolute clarity, a sentence completed by sky and water. Some later remember a serpent held in the eagle's beak. Others recall only light and the glint of dew on cactus pads. What is certain is the sense of rightness that settles over the crowd, a feeling like a key finding its lock. You wade nearer until lake water cools your calves. The cactus gleams with tiny fruits, red as coals and sweet in season. Bees braid a low hymn around the flowers, and dragonflies check the edges of the stone as if reading a border in a codex. The priest unwraps the bundle and lifts it so the god may look upon the sign. You feel the gaze of Huitzilopochtli on the scene, a warmth across your back that is not only the sun. The omen is not just permission, it is command. Build here, root here, raise your future from water. The place is poor by any measure of ease. It is mud and wave and biting insects. But the people know how to teach land to hold. They drive stakes into the shallows, lash wattle between them, and pour in reeds and mud, patient as rain. They mark a modest precinct for their god with poles cut from willow and banners dyed with cochineal and soot. They speak their city's future aloud until their voices persuade the air to begin carrying a new name. Tenochtitlan, stone cactus place, a word with weight and bite and water in it. You mouth the syllables and feel grit and sweetness mixed on your tongue. Toward evening, the sky shows a band of copper, and the lake looks strewn with coins. Canoes lift out of shadow like crescent moons. You watch families learn the new roads, which are waterways instead of streets. You see the young men practice with atlatl on a sand spit, the darts singing over weed and ripple. You smell masa warming on griddles, hear the laughter that returns when fear loosens its hand. A woman smooths a child's hair, and for a moment the city to come is visible in the motion of her palm. You step near the stone of the omen again. Already, someone has sketched its shape on bark paper with black and red lines, the beginnings of a glyph that will travel through time. In later codices, the symbol becomes a city's badge, a piece of the basin's grammar. It will appear with Atl Tlachinoli, the curling sign of water and fire intertwined, a reminder that creation and destruction share a single breath. You trace the curls in the air and feel the city's pulse begin to catch the rhythm. Night deepens. A soft rain moves over the lake, and the first shelters wear a shine like fish skin. The people place maguey fibers to dry, stack reeds, and anchor their work with stones carried in from the shallows. There is a calm determination that turns hardship into craft. You notice how carefully they speak to the land and the water, asking for patience while they earn their place. You notice the small altars that face both directions, toward the god of war and direction, and toward Tlaloc, the rain giver, whose mood can change in a heartbeat. Balance is the first architecture. Gratitude is the first roof. By a small fire, an elder tells a simple truth. The sign has been seen. That is all. The rest is labor that never ends. You feel the meaning settle like a cloak on your shoulders. Tomorrow, more stakes. Tomorrow, more mud hauled by hand. Tomorrow, a path laid through reeds so traders can find their way to the new market. The work is humble and endless, yet each stroke of effort wraps the omen in reality until vision and sweat are inseparable. The lake keeps giving language. You learn words that taste of water. Chinampa, for the raised field that will soon feed thousands with maize and chilies and flowers. Ahuahote, for the willow that holds the edges with a living grip. Acai, for the canoe that will serve as horse and cart and river road. You speak them softly, and the words spread on your breath like ripples, touching 100 tiny shores. There is beauty in the lexicon of survival. There is poetry in the list of tools and tasks. There is music in the call of vendors who will one day bring cacao and cotton to these docks. Some night around this time, a comet burns its white thread across the basin. Some say it favors the omen, bending gently toward the stone and the cactus as if offering a second seal. Others remember it as a warning that visits all new beginnings, a reminder that stars move according to laws no priest can bind. The sky tells both stories at once, and the people sleep more deeply for having heard them. Before sleep takes you, you consider the mystery that remains lodged in the heart of this moment. What homeland gave way to Aztlan's remembrance? What path of migration twisted through canyons and deserts to bring you here? What the eagle carried in its gaze when it watched the people kneel? The codices paint certainty with clean lines, yet you feel a margin of unspoken truth around every glyph. Some recollections name stone and cactus and eagle as a single spark from which all else follows. Others hint that the vision arrived in stages, a series of smaller signs that sharpened over years into one clear image. The mystery does not weaken the omen, it lends it depth. The fire dwindles to glowing points. The lake taps lightly at the stakes like a friend at the door. You lie beside wickerwork and bundles of tools. The city hum is faint, a sound not yet born, but already audible to anyone who listens with patience. In the last moments of wakefulness, you taste the sweetness of nopal fruit and the mineral sting of lake wind. You see in your mind the eagle's shadow pass across the water, wing beats slow and sovereign, promising that the hard place will turn generous if tended with courage. Morning will bring shovels and songs. Morning will bring the first mapped canals and the first agreed market day. Morning will bring a name scratched into wet clay so that it dries into an object that must be carried with care. For now, the omen holds its place on a stone in shallow water. It is enough. The city will rise around it. The city will learn to float and not be swept away. The eagle will keep watch, and the cactus will flower, and the people will take root where no one thought roots could hold. Morning spreads a pale gold across the lake as you set your feet into the work. Stakes of ahuejote lie in bundled rows. Reeds rustle with a soft hiss. Mud waits in broad wicker baskets, heavy and shining. A low song moves through the camp, unhurried and firm, the kind of melody that keeps hands steady when the body tires. You walk the new edges of Tenochtitlan and feel how the city begins not with walls, but with an agreement between water and will. You learn the grammar of chinampa making, a patient order of steps that turns marsh into garden. First, a rectangle is marked with poles driven into the shallows, each pole sunk until the lake bed takes hold. Between them, woven hurdles of willow and reed become a fence that catches silt. Canoes nose into the square and spill mud in slow black billows. Layer by layer, reeds and muck and lake weeds are stacked until the surface crowns above the water like a low raft. Willow saplings are planted along the edges, so their roots stitch the banks into a living seam. The rectangle becomes a bed. The bed becomes a field. The field becomes a promise that bodies will be fed. You move soil with a potter's care. The mud slicks your palms and cools your shins. The air smells of lilies and damp wood. Voices carry across the water. Children ferry baskets. Elders supervise from mats, counting the rhythm and reminding the young to thank the lake out loud. Tlaloc receives a pinch of maize and a whispered name. Huitzilopochtli receives a breath held and released like the pull of an atlatl. The balance that began at the shrine now settles into the work itself, a quiet twinship of rain and resolve. A canal opens beside the new plot, black as polished obsidian and smooth as a sleeping animal. Canoes glide along it with the silence of herons. You watch a woman press her fingers into a seedbed of moist dredgings. Maize seeds rest in careful rows. Beans are tucked beside stalks so they may climb. Squash will sprawl across the damp earth and keep it cool. Flowers are placed at the corners because beauty steadies the mind and invites good company from the spirits. Soon there will be chilies that sting and sweet herbs that calm and amaranth that lifts a soft crimson when the sun moves low. Men set out to lengthen the causeways. Piles of stone are ferried in canoes and handed along a chain of arms. Baskets of gravel follow, then mats of reed to hold the edges tight. The path rises from the lake, a long white ribbon that joins island to shore. You walk it and feel the city's spine forming beneath your steps. The builders leave spaces for sluice gates so water can pass and fish can travel. They shape small drawbridges that can be lifted at night. The city is learning to open and close its eyes. On a bright afternoon, you stand with a group of workers at the edge of the shallow salt. They point toward a farther shore where the water glints with a different color. The lake is a family of waters, some sweet, some brackish. Over years to come, a great dike will rise to keep the salt from creeping into the tender gardens. The memory of that work arrives early, as if the future were leaning over the shoulder of the present to lend a tool. People later will speak a ruler's name in connection with the dike that separates waters and saves harvests. A wall of timber and stone that rides the surface for miles and turns the basin into ordered bowls. You taste the thought of it and feel how the city treats water not as enemy, but as a partner that needs clear boundaries to remain kind. By evening, a light wind threads the canals and rings small bells hung from door lintels to please the spirits. Smoke from hearths smells of masa and hoja santa. Canoe prows tap softly against wooden moorings. A vendor calls out tamales filled with beans and herbs. Another sets a basket of axolotls beside a brazier. The market is modest now, but its cadence already hints at the vast humming squares that will one day draw traders from every shore of the lake. You hear praise spoken for neat rows of produce and for the fairness of scales. Order, even in small things, is how a city agrees with itself. At the temple precinct, workers carry baskets of stone up a temporary ramp. The first platform rises with steady, inward-leaning walls and a stair that tells the feet to lift with reverence. Offerings are sealed inside the new layers. Beads of jade, shells that remember the sea, figurines of gods who listen. Drums begin a measured cadence while men and women pass rocks hand to hand, each piece finding a place that makes the whole more sound. The temple does not yet tower. It breathes like a heart that has begun to beat. You sleep with the lake a hand's breadth away. In the night you wake to a gentle slapping and the far hoot of an owl. The air holds a hint of salt and the sweetness of crushed water mint. Somewhere, a poet recites a few lines to test their shape. The words compare life to a flower that opens and closes, to jade that shatters, to a song that slips between reeds and vanishes, then returns. The poem drifts across the water like a skiff and leaves a faint trail of calm behind it. Days lengthen and the chinampas multiply like tesserae in a mosaic. From above, the pattern looks like a woven mat laid upon the lake. Between the fields, men paddle with easy strokes, backs broad, faces steady. A messenger runs along a causeway with a painted stick to mark his authority. A craftsman carves a canoe prow into the shape of a hummingbird's beak as a quiet invocation for speed. A girl learns to balance a basket on her hip and step from bank to boat without rocking the water. The city teaches the body a new grace. Facts enter the fabric without hurry. The raised fields can yield several harvests a year, a rhythm that turns food into sureness, and sureness into time for art and war and devotion. Causeways bind Tenochtitlan to the mainland and help patrol the flow of tribute and trade. The first precinct of the Templo Mayor becomes the axis for festivals that will mark the year by fire and water. The city counts its people and counts its baskets and learns how to make the lake count for them. A debate rises quietly as work becomes custom. Some elders say chinampas belong to deep memory, a craft learned from peoples who made gardens on water in earlier centuries along southern shores. Others say the Mexica sharpened the method with a new scale and a new discipline, turning a scattered practice into the spine of a metropolis. You hear both voices in the same breath and accept that a city is built from inheritance and invention in measures that are hard to separate. Rain visits in short, clean curtains. The willow leaves toss, bright as fish scales. The fields drink calmly. Runoff is guided by ditches so roots keep their grip. The builders inspect the causeways after the storm and tamp fresh gravel where the edges slipped. A team repairs a sluice gate with lashed timber and a prayer for smooth water. Work never ends. Work becomes the prayer itself. One evening, you ride in a canoe at the hour when birds sweep low and the sun paints the water with a copper wash. The city murmurs around you. A boy practices the drum with soft hands. A priest passes with a bundle of paper flags that will bloom at dawn along a new altar. A woman arranges flor de cempasúchil in a clay pot at the corner of her chinampa. The scent is bright and earthy. The petals look like small suns set where earth meets water. The city wears them like a crown. Night deepens. Torches prick the dark along the causeway. The lake exhales a cool breath. You lie on a reed mat and feel the faint quiver of boats passing. In your thoughts, the fields stretch farther than the eye can travel, a quilt stitched by patient hands. The city has learned to float without drifting. It has learned to root without choking the water. It has learned to rise by honoring the surface that holds it. Tomorrow brings more baskets, more poles, more songs, and the calm pride of labor turned into landscape. The first shape of Tenochtitlan is complete enough to stand in the mind. The rest will grow from this quiet agreement between people and lake. You walk the causeway in a season of bright banners and clenched hands. Canoes nose the docks heavy with stone and maize. Messengers arrive winded and grave. The air tastes of rain and ash. On the horizon a storm gathers that is not weather. Azcapotzalco sits like a dark stone on the western shore, its Tepanek lords rich with tribute and sharpened pride. Their overseers count cotton mantles and cacao and copper bells. Their spears have kept the basin in a slow orbit around their will. The road is ready for a change, And the sound of that change is a drum that starts low and will not stop. In the plaza of Tenochtitlan, a council meets. The ruler Itzcoatl speaks with a voice that carries like water under a bridge. Beside him stands Tlacaelel, with eyes that read people the way a priest reads stars. You feel how their strength is not only in weapons, but in a way of arranging meaning so that power gathers and keeps its shape. The people listen with hands resting on knees. Warriors check the laces of their sandals. Mothers wrap children and draw them close to the heart. The plan that enters the air is simple and clear. The Mexica will break the net that holds the lake. Your feet carry you across the water to Texcoco, where a prince in exile hides among allies and sympathizers. Nezahualcoyotl is his name, and his mind holds plans the way a grove holds birds. You hear a quiet song that he has written, a poem about jade that breaks and flowers that fade, and the longing to leave a name that will not vanish. The song is soft and still it feels like iron. Tenochtitlan offers him the chance to reclaim his city. He offers Tenochtitlan a partner with roots in deep learning and old prestige. The alliance waits like a door that needs one last push. Rain falls in sudden curtains. Boats slide under willow branches. The talks move from shrine to courtyard to garden. Tlacopan sits between the two greater powers like a bridge post. A shape appears in the air as if woven from reeds and smoke. 3 cities will stand together. Tribute will be shared so it does not sour into envy. War will be prosecuted so that no battle scatters the coalition. The elders murmur approval. The young straighten their backs. The lake listens and holds its breath. You travel in thought to the western shores, where the Tepanec capital sits guarded and sure. Maxtla wears his rule like a cloak cut to impress and to terrify. Yet the basin shifts beneath him. Runners bring rumors that feel like sparks landing on dry grass. When armies move, you see them as lines of color across the plain. Shields glint. Standards rise with hummingbird and sun disk. Drums roll like distant thunder. The first encounters shake the ground and leave a taste of iron on the tongue. You feel the surprise spread through Tepanec ranks as the coalition proves more than a rumor. Street by street, causeway by causeway, the fight becomes a net that tightens. The basin has many watchers, and each city weighs the danger and the opportunity. Some bend quickly, some resist until they see where the weight will settle. You stand in a doorway in a village near the western shore and sense the turn. Smoke lifts from workshops. Women pull jars back from walkways and whisper short prayers for the living. Warriors pass with obsidian blades that drink the late light. In a courtyard, a priest sprinkles water from a gourd over a painted shield. On the wind, you hear flutes played for courage and for homecoming. The day comes when Azcapotzalco feels the weight of the new alignment. Siege works rise like teeth. Canoes block channels. The old tribute routes twist and fail. You can almost hear the sound of a system cracking. The fall is not a single blow. It is the slow cracking of pottery in a fire that grows too hot. When the city yields, a space opens in the basin like a held breath released. The Tepanec center shifts from master to partner. The Mexica stand taller. Texcoco stands restored. Tlacopan settles into the role that balances 2 giants. You walk the morning after victory along a causeway that gleams with rain. The air smells of wet stone and roasted maize. Fishermen move quietly, as if the lake should not be startled by the size of what has changed. In Tenochtitlan, the plaza fills. Offerings bloom on altars. Banners ripple like shallow streams in a breeze. The new order takes public shape with a pact spoken under the eyes of gods. Each city receives its share of tribute. The Mexica take the lion's portion. Texcoco accepts the weight of law and learning. Tlacopan receives its part and keeps the measure. The 3 knot themselves into a braid that will hold. The cultural center begins to spread its wings. From Texcoco come judges and engineers and poets. From Tenochtitlan comes a sharpened energy that seeks to test itself against every horizon. From Tlacopan comes a steadiness that keeps the braid from fraying. The basin's smaller towns adjust their tribute lists and review their loyalties. Roads become more crowded with messengers and tax carriers. Markets open with greater variety and stricter oversight. You feel the entire valley pick up a new rhythm, as if a larger drum has begun to speak underneath the ordinary music of daily life. A set of clean facts settles into the mind like stones set into mortar. Around the year we now call 1428, the coalition defeats Azcapotzalco and calls itself the Triple Alliance. The pact orders conquest across the basin and beyond. Tribute lists soon name cotton from the hot lands, feathers of quetzal and heron, cacao beans that ring in baskets like dry rain, warrior captives taken under the eye of the gods. The alliance remaps power so thoroughly that even the old hills seem to stand at a slightly different angle. Yet you hear a quiet uncertainty that refuses to vanish. Some voices say the division of tribute followed a strict rule with 2 parts to Tenochtitlan, 2 parts to Texcoco, and 1 part to Tlacopan. Others recall more elastic arrangements that shifted with politics and personality. Some say Tlacael guided the meaning of the victory with a hidden hand that reshaped memory itself. Some remember only that fire and stone ran together in those years and left the basin with a new story about itself. The margins of the truth stay soft, and that softness feels faithful to how power lives in the world. In the months after the victory, you watch people pour energy into public works as if the land needed a body to fit the new spirit. Causeways are widened. Dikes are renewed. Aqueducts begin to cross the water with a clean arc. The Templo Mayor receives fresh stone. Ceremonies instruct the year to begin again with a deeper voice. In Texcoco, Nezahualcoyotl shapes gardens and courts where engineers solve problems with lines and numbers, while poets weave lines of breath and memory. You sit under a shade tree and hear a stanza about the bird that sings for a short time and then is gone. The words lift and fall like a small boat riding a long wave. The army learns a new confidence. Comicac and Telpachali fill with boys who run until their lungs burn and who study the old songs until they can recite them in the dark. Captains drill formations in plazas chalked with lines. Armorers sharpen obsidian blades until the edges shine like cold water. Standards are repaired and painted. The alliance measures itself by victories that bring distant towns into orbit and fill warehouses with cotton and salt and incense. The lake carries home the sound of paddles that beat like a steady heart. You walk a market square where the lanes run straight and the stalls breathe order. Inspectors move through the crowd, checking measures and prices. A judge sits beneath a canopy and hears a dispute with a calm face. The scene holds a sense of clarity that can be felt in the body. The empire is not only war and glory, it is beans counted correctly, cloth weighed honestly, water flowing where it should, words kept. You buy a small basket of chilies and feel how the heat lifts your spirit without anger. At night, the plaza glows. Musicians set a rhythm that transforms feet into a single tide. A dancer wears a mantle sewn with turquoise discs that catch fire in torchlight. Priests lift paper banners that flutter like pale birds. People look up at the 2 shrines on the temple platform and feel the axis of the world hold strong. In that gaze lies a certainty that feeds effort without strain. The alliance seems as fixed as the volcanoes at the valley's edge. You sleep with the sound of the lake at your ear and the faint scent of copal in your hair. The night carries both victory and the sober knowledge that victory is a starting point. The basin lies quiet, but beyond the ridges, new hills wait with their own gods and their own songs. The road has widened. The pace has steadied. You feel the city's breath deepen as it prepares to draw the next chapter into its lungs, calm and sure, as if the lake itself were teaching the empire how to move without haste. You cross the plaza while morning smoke lifts in pale blue threads and bells speak a slow, steady language from the temple stairs. The city moves with the deliberate calm of a craftsman laying gold in a mosaic. At the heart of this measured day stands Tlacaelel, the counselor whose gaze weighs histories, whose words set memory like mortar. You feel the air warm near him, as if the sun were focused into a narrow ray that hardens clay and sharpens steel. His presence does not stride, it arranges. His power does not shout, it edits the world until it says what he needs it to say. He stands with Itzcotl in an inner court where reed mats soften footfalls and painted walls hold scenes of older days. Scribes crouch nearby with brushes trimmed to a point as fine as a hummingbird's beak. The counselors speak quietly. The room smells of lime plaster and copal. Tlacaelel's voice carries a patient gravity. You sense his resolve to lift Huitzilopochtli until that name becomes the city's rhythm, the drum inside every march, the spark inside every vow. The god of sun and war grows in the mouth of the people. syllables bright as feathers and hot as fresh obsidian. A command passes like a ripple through a still pond. Codices are gathered, some treasured for generations, some kept in corners where dust has softened their colors. Tlacaelel chooses what survives and what returns to ash. The fire that consumes certain books is not a tantrum, it is a policy, a pruning that intends growth. The flames smell of glue and bark paper and the long breath of stories. You feel the ache of loss as pictures curl and blacken, yet you also feel the cold clarity of a new shape forming around the emptiness. Old lineages of rival cities lose weight in the record. The Mexica step into a story that suits the work ahead. The Templo Mayor receives renewed meaning. On its twin heights, Huitzilopochtli and Tlaloc look out across water and crops and causeways. Priests arrange festivals that turn the year like a wheel with teeth of song and smoke. Drums begin before dawn with a low pulse that enters the body without asking. Paper banners are cut and painted in blue and red, their edges fluttering like breath. Flowers come in armfuls, marigolds bright as little suns, their scent sharp and earthy. You climb the steps with others and feel the stone hold your feet steady. The wind touches your face at the top and tastes of rain and hot stone. Tlacaelel threads his reforms into law and training. The Comicac teaches discipline forged from cold mornings and long memorization. The Telpachali teaches endurance and teamwork that moves like a single heartbeat. Captains carry obsidian blades that gleam like water at midnight. Standards flare with hummingbird and fire serpent. The words spoken to recruits are simple, a chorus about duty and honor and the holiness of labor that never grows loud. The city begins to see itself as a flint that must be kept sharp against the world's toughness. You pass a court where tribute is counted with the stillness of a ceremony. Cotton mantles stack in neat piles. Shells whisper as they pour from basket to basket. Cacao beans make a soft rain when weighed. Inspectors touch measures with fingers that know the difference between fair and false. Tlacael's reach sets rules that are strict yet predictable. Justice becomes a path the foot can learn, straight and well swept. You feel the relief that comes when people know what the day expects and what it will permit. In a quiet room, poets bend over bark paper and arrange words like beads. One composes lines that compare life to jade that breaks and to flowers that wither, yet still praises the sweetness of breath and song. Another copies glyphs that show the curling sign of water joined to fire, a knot of Atl and Tlaquinoli, a symbol for sacred conflict and the cleansing forge of renewal. The art that rises in these years wears Tlacael's clarity without losing its softness. Beauty serves order, and order gives beauty a frame to endure. You walk through a year of famine that arrives like a gray veil. Rains fail or come too hard and late. Maize sulks in the fields. Markets whisper with worry. Tlacaelel does not let meanings unravel. He threads the crisis into ritual and resolve. Granaries open with measure. Tribute is diverted with purpose. A ceremony of new fire approaches with a gravity that tastes of ash and hope. At the binding of years, when the count of 52 has turned, people extinguish hearths and stand in darkness, waiting to know whether the sun will accept the renewed world. The night stretches long. On a distant hill, a fire kindles in the chest cavity of a sacrificial figure and leaps, a small sun held in human hands. From that point, the city receives sparks carried on torches and braziers. Hearths bloom again, like red flowers, along canals and streets. The smell of fresh smoke and masa returns to kitchens. You hear relief loosen the shoulders of a people who have looked into a quiet sky and felt the thinness of life. The new fire settles the fear and binds memory to courage. The fact takes its place in the story, a ceremony recorded in speech and picture, a reassurance that order can be renewed when its edges fray. In the years that follow, conquest resumes with a steadiness that speaks of system rather than impulse. Tribute lists lengthen, banners travel farther, inspectors learn new dialects. Tlacael prefers victories that bring goods and prestige, yet he also prefers victories that bring clarity. Enemy cities feel the twin hands of awe and accounting. Markets in Tenochtitlan shine with goods from hot lands and cold uplands, from coasts that taste of salt and mountain towns that smell of resin. Canoes carry back cotton and cacao and feathers that shine like captured dawn. Scholars will one day wonder how much of this rising identity belongs to Tlacaelel's mind and how much to the natural tide of empire. Some will say he invented a new memory by trimming the old branches of history and training those that remain to frame the Mexica as destined. Others will say he simply named the current that was already moving, giving it banks so that it did not flood and vanish. The truth sits where policy and providence meet, in a room where a counselor measures words like stones and builds a channel for a river that would have flowed in any case. At a festival for Huitzilopochtli, you watch a procession enter the plaza with dancers whose ankles carry shells that whisper with each step. The air trembles with drums and flutes. Priests lift obsidian blades that catch the sun. Offerings pile at the foot of the stairs until the stone wears the colors of a garden. The heat rises and then gentles. The crowd quiets, and in that hush the city hears itself. A people grown from water and reed has taught the lake to bear a capital that gleams. A story chosen and tended has become a spine strong enough to bear conquest and famine and renewal. You end the day along a canal where the light goes thin and copper. A boy recites the opening lines of a song learned in school, words that praise labor and obedience and the bright generosity of the sun. An old woman threads marigold petals onto a string for tomorrow's altar. A messenger runs with a painted staff and does not look tired. The city feels tuned, like a drumhead stretched true. You sense Tlatelolco's work in the silence between sounds, in the certainty that the next day will rise in the same key. The lake breathes under the dark. Torches move on causeways like slow constellations. In your mind, codices close their covers and wait for morning, their pages now trimmed to carry a single strong song. The god who hears the hummingbird's wing sits with the rain giver in a balanced calm. The people sleep with hands rough from useful work and minds eased by a story that explains sacrifice and victory and the price of sunlight. You lie down on a mat and feel the city hum through the reed floor as if the ground itself has learned a steady prayer. The fire of meaning has taken, and it burns without frenzy, a coal's glow that warms every room that calls itself Mexica. You step into the temple precinct at first light when the stone is cool and the city's breath is low. The platforms rise from the plaza like mountains shaped by patient hands. The stairs climb in twin flights toward twin hearts, one for Huitzilopochtli and one for Tlaloc. The faces of the shrines hold mourning in their smooth plains. The edges catch a pale gold that will deepen as the sun lifts. You feel how the whole space gathers the world and centers it, as if the lake, the fields, and the distant volcanoes were threads drawn into a single knot. The plaza carries a hush that sounds like respect. Sweeping crews finish their slow circuits with brooms made of stiff grass. Vendors set jugs of water at the edges for dancers who will soon need them. Drummers test skins with soft palms. Conch shells send low calls that seem to rise from the stone itself. The air smells of copal and flowers and wet granite. You see the first offerings arrive with a quiet rhythm. Baskets of maize place their steady weight near the stairs. Strings of marigold fold into loops of sun. A tray of small turquoise discs shines with the color of shallow sea. The Templo Mayor has already grown through several lives. Each generation sheathed the last in new stone and raised the rooflines higher so that the city's devotion felt taller in the body. Beneath the stairs lie older stairs, and beneath those, older still. The builders set dedicatory caches inside the layers, deposits of shells from distant coasts, knives of obsidian that hold a cold glint, tiny figures of gods who listen without moving. Somewhere in the lower darkness sleeps a disc carved with Coyolxauhqui, the moon sister cut into brilliant fragments that hold their own fierce calm. The temple carries these layers the way a tree carries rings. A procession enters from the southern street with measured steps. Dancers wear headdresses that lift like gardens. White feathers tremble at each turn. Shells stitched to ankle cords whisper against bone as feet rise and fall together. Their movement makes an arc that repeats itself with gentle precision. The repetition becomes a trance that steadies faces and keeps breath from rushing. Priests walk behind with paper flags painted in blue for water and in red for heat. Each flag flickers like a small bird trying to lift. The drums lengthen their voice and spread it across the plaza until your own heart adopts the same tempo. At the western edge, a school of the Kalmakak steps forward to sing. Their voices are young and cool. The melody enters the space like a clean stream. The song names mountains and rivers, and the first raising of fields from lake water. It names the twin shrines and the balance they keep. It praises rain that remembers its duty, and sun that keeps time over maize. The words do not hurry. They repeat with variations that braid meanings the way willow roots braid a bank. You can taste the sweetness of the language in your mouth, even though you do not speak. The vowels carry air. The consonants press lightly like fingers against a drum. From the northern stair, the priests of Tlaloc pour water from painted jars so that tiny rivers run down the steps and shine. Children watch with wide eyes as the rivulets split and join and spin a fine lace across the stone. The gesture asks the sky to imitate what hands have begun. Gifts for the rain lord gather beside the jars, figures of frogs that look ready to leap, shells that remember surf, sprays of lilies harvested at dawn from canals that still wear mist. Older people remember seasons when the city waited for cloud and wind, as if listening for a friend to call from the lake. Tears were once welcomed as good signs, because the sky might choose to echo the human face and let its own water fall. From the southern stair, the priests of Huitzilopochtli lift standards that shine with hummingbird feathers and bright mosaic. The sunlight strikes the blue and green and gold until the colors become their own kind of warmth. A captain places a shield at the base of the steps and rests his hand on it in a simple vow. The god's house watches. The stone underneath your feet feels steady and warm now. The plaza's breath rises and falls like a sleeping animal. Order in the body becomes order in the city. A fact settles like a smooth stone in the palm. The temple marks the axis mundi for the Mexica world, the place where sky meets earth and water meets fire. The festivals turn around it like a year carved into songs. Each month wears its rites and its flavors, from the flower-bright days of spring to the cold, tight evenings when people remember hunger and the work that lifts it. The city's memory is trained by this wheel. Children learn what each shrine asks and gives. Traders bring goods that suit each feast. Families plan offerings the way farmers plan seed and harvest. You stand at the top, landing behind a line of acolytes and look over the lake. The causeways run straight as rules. The chinampas lie like a woven mat. Canoes move through their lanes with the calm of bees among flowers. In the far distance, a volcano holds a small plume that smudges the sky with a soft gray. The temple makes the view feel arranged, as if the world were a codex laid open for reading. The city knows itself from this height. The city agrees with itself when its two great houses look out side by side. Midday brings heat that smells of stone and copal. A breeze wraps the stairs and cools faces lifted in song. A musician changes flutes and draws a line of notes that twist like smoke. A woman kneels and sets a bowl of amaranth at the base of the stair and smooths its surface so it shines. A child lays 3 cacao beans in a neat row and taps them gently as if to wake their aroma. The plaza becomes a table set with care, and the gods are treated as guests who know how to bless a household that has cooked and swept and sung with diligence. There is a mystery that takes its place without insisting on a single answer. Some say the temple was aligned to greet the sun in a way that marked parts of the year, a meeting of shadow and stare that taught time to the body. Others feel that the builders listened to water and wind and placed the mass so the precinct held a calm that did not crack in storms. A few swear the twin heads were meant to teach that rain and war are not enemies, but partners in growth and survival. The answers live in stone, in the memory of priests, and in the way your chest loosens when you stand here and breathe. Late afternoon softens everything. The banners now move slowly, as if tired and satisfied. The drums relax into a low purr. Vendors pass with cool drinks and tamales wrapped in leaves. You taste masa and herbs and feel the body remember that devotion and nourishment belong to the same day. A judge sits in shade and hears a small case with patient eyes. The market beyond the precinct still buzzes, yet the noise turns respectful at the edge of the stairs, as if the hurrying world bows its head while it passes a doorway. You linger as the final songs rise. The priests offer closing words that are more like breath than speech. The last smoke climbs into thinning light and dissolves. Stone cools under your palm. The plaza empties with the same order it held at the height of ceremony. Workers coil ropes, fold flags, stack drums, and carry the leftover flowers to a side altar where their scent will bless the night. From below the temple's newest skin, you can almost hear the older stones settle and approve, as if the generations beneath were pleased to feel new feet keeping their rhythm. The city receives the day's energy and spreads it along canals and causeways. Children imitate the dance steps in doorways and laugh. A poet begins a short ode to the moment when two shrines cast a single long shadow across the plaza. A craftsman rubs a turquoise disc with a cloth until it catches a last drop of sun. The lake takes the reflection of the temple and smooths it into an image that glides, quiet and sure between chinampa rows. Nightfall arrives on soft feet. Torches stitch light along the precinct walls. Conch shells sound once, low and round, and silence afterwards feels complete. You sit on the lowest stair and rest your hand on stone that has learned to be the world's hinge. The twin houses are dark shapes against a handful of stars. The scent of marigold fades into a general sweetness. The temple sleeps like a great animal in a den, calm and watchful, its breath matched to the city's breath, its heart a steady ember that keeps the night from feeling empty. Dawn unrolls a thin silver across the canals, and you rise into a day that smells of wet earth and corn masa. The chinampas lie in neat rectangles, dark and damp, their willow borders drinking quietly. Mist sits low, as if the lake has decided to keep a small piece of moon close to the ground. Men and women step from boat to bed with the care of dancers, feet sure on narrow edges. The first strokes of a wooden paddle sound like a slow heart waking. Tenochtitlan feeds itself one basket at a time, and the rhythm feels old and clean. You watch hands open furrows with a pointed stick and set maize with a motion learned from elders who learned from their elders. Beans slip in beside the kernels so the vines will climb the stalks. Squash spreads in wide leaves to shade the soil and keep it cool. Amaranth flickers red along the margins. Chilies take their small thrones where sun will bless their heat. Flowers stand at corners like lanterns that never burn out. A boy carries a clay jar and pours water into a seedbed so carefully that not a drop falls where it should not. A girl moves in a canoe stacked with cut reeds, her paddle carving a path through a ribbon of morning light. A farmer lifts a clod and crumbles it, nodding at the texture that means the dredgings were rich. The lake feeds the beds and the beds feed the city. Each chinampa holds a piece of water inside it, locked like a secret, so that even hungry seasons cannot easily starve these plots. You hear soft talk about harvest times that return more than once a year. The surplus becomes assurance, and assurance becomes hours for crafts and poems and drills and festivals. The fields that float keep time for a city that wants to be more than hungry mouths. Canoes begin to thicken on the canals. Piled high with greens and maize ears and gourds and flowers, they move toward the market with a quiet push of shoulders and backs. Fish gleam in woven baskets, silver and quick even after the net. Axolotls blink in shallow trays with the patience of creatures that learned stillness from the lake itself. The day's first tortillas warm on stone, a smell that binds the living to the morning. Somewhere a flute answers a drum with a line of notes that step gently over the water. You follow the flow to Tlatelolco's great square, where market voices swell and fold like waves. Lines of stalls hold order the way causeways hold line. Beans sit in clay bowls sorted by color. Salt gleams in small white cones. Cotton mantles lie in stacks that breathe clean cloth. Cacao beans ring softly when measured, a sound many hands understand as payment. Potters display bowls that remember the shape of the maker's palm. Carvers show obsidian knives whose edges catch light with the chill of mountain shadows. A man lays out featherwork that looks like a piece of sunrise laid on reed mat. Inspectors move through the lanes with a measured pace that calms the crowd. Scales are checked with a practiced eye. A crier calls news about prices and quarrels settled. A judge in a cool shade listens to a dispute about a cracked pot and a short measure, giving each voice its space before finding a path that both can accept. You feel a respect for rules that are known in the body, rules that let trade move like clean water through a canal without sudden snags or mud. The empire comes here with its goods and its faces. From the hot lands arrive cotton and cacao and tropical birds whose feathers carry two kinds of fire, one hot in color, one cool in sheen. From the highlands come salt cakes and obsidian and meat smoked to travel. From the coasts come shells that speak of waves and storms and the sound of foam. Every path that tribute and trade can take seems to touch this square, and the square in turn touches every kitchen and altar in the lake world. A clean fact takes its place without pushing. The market at Tlatelolco can draw tens of thousands of buyers and sellers on great days, a living river that flows within lines kept straight by custom and law. Later eyes will try to count and compare, and numbers will vary like the weather, yet the feeling in the square makes any number believable. The order carries a warmth that speaks of habit, not imposition. A system this large does not stand if it serves only the high. It stands because every hand knows what comes next. You taste a drink made with cacao and maize, a froth spooned high, the bitterness lifted with flower spice. A vendor smiles at a sale that pays for wax and salt and thread. Children learn coins of meaning by watching fingers exchange beans and cloth and words. A priest buys lilies for a small shrine and tucks them into a basket already rich with marigold. The square hums like a hive that decides each minute how to divide sweetness among mouths and ceremonies. Boats deliver a second wave of produce and turn back toward the chinampas with empty baskets stacked like nested moons. On the water, the wind is mild. Herons stand like men thinking. Willow leaves make a soft rain of green upon the surface. A woman sings to keep her stroke even, and the notes carry to another boat where a child answers with laughter. The fields wait for the next cut and the next turning with patience that looks like prayer. In the canal quarter, you pass a granary where baskets pile high and cool. A scribe marks a tally with brush and quiet care, his strokes repeating with the comfort of ritual. The city stores what it needs against seasons that can change the face of the sky. Nearby, a workshop spins maguey fiber into cord and cloth. The line between farm and craft blurs in a way that makes both stronger. Sturdy tools return to the beds. Fine textiles travel to the market and then to the houses of those who keep order. A poet recites a few lines on a quay while waiting for a load. The poem compares maize to the human heart, both needing protection and heat and rhythm. The words feel like advice that would make a field thrive and a family peaceful. People nod and smile and return to their tasks, their backs straightened by a song rather than a command. The square does not empty of beauty, even when work crowds every moment. Beauty is woven into the day like a border pattern on a mantle. A quiet uncertainty drifts through the edges of what you see. Some say the chinampa system began in the south long before Tenochtitlan claimed the lake, and that the Mexica scaled an older craft to imperial size. Others hear pride in the way the city speaks of invention and improvement and the discipline that keeps the beds in clean lines. The truth may live where hands learn from hands and then pushed further than anyone had thought to push. The fields children see now are bigger and more precise than the ones their grandparents grew, and that is enough to call progress by whatever name is kind. Afternoon light turns warm and steady. Sellers of fruit sing short calls with the rise and fall of a lullaby. A dancer in the square recovers from a morning ceremony and helps fold up paper flags painted with water curls and flame tongues, laying them flat so the colors will sleep well. A young man in a guard mantle watches the lanes with friendly eyes. The certainty that food will appear tomorrow lets kindness travel farther before it thins. You ride back through the canal under a sky that has let go of its noon brightness. Fields stretch in ranks that comfort the mind with their order. Willows cut soft shadows across rows where shoots already stand upright. A fisherman poles past with the patience of someone who knows the lake's small moods. The city breathes through its roots. The chinampas hold the breath steady. The market teaches it the shape of fairness. The causeways carry it between home and square. Tenochtitlan becomes calm in the body because it knows how tomorrow will taste. Evening folds itself along the banks, and the last boat's nose home. Cooking fires wake, and the smell of herbs and corn and fish settles on doorways. Laughter moves from house to house like a friendly ghost. You step onto a narrow path and run a hand along willow bark that the bed itself depends on. The living border hums and the water beneath answers. The fields that float do not drift. They hold. They keep promises made at dawn and kept at dusk. The city eats in peace and sleeps with a steady heart because water and hands have signed a pact that asks for effort and pays with grace. Morning light sheets across plastered walls where painted glyphs glow like embers under milk. You enter the quarter where scribes grind pigments and judges speak in rooms that smell of lime and copal. Brushes rest in gourd cups. Bark paper lies stacked like quiet rivers. A boy recites dates under his breath until the count settles and becomes part of the air he breathes. The city learns to write itself each day so that tomorrow can recognize its own face. In a shaded court, a magistrate sits cross-legged on a woven mat. He wears a mantle trimmed with careful stitchwork that tells the eye this is a man the law has chosen to speak for it. Litigants kneel before him with hands steady, each allowed time to arrange words as neatly as a scribe arranges glyphs. Witnesses stand in a line and lower their eyes when they speak, not from fear but from respect for quiet. Penalties are known, like weather that arrives when the season turns. Theft answers to restitution and severity. Drunkenness answers to fines and shame, unless rank demands harder balance. Adultery meets a blade more often than a lecture. The predictability carries a cold comfort, and with it the warmth that comes when people trust that the same path lies under every foot. Across the lake in Texcoco, Nezahualcoyotl orders courts and gardens with the same precision. He sets laws that teach nobles to carry their weight and commoners to expect fairness without impudence. Engineers measure spillways while poets polish lines that will live after their mouths have cooled. You listen to a short poem that speaks of jade that breaks and feathers that burn away in time, and yet asks the heart to sing while it breathes. The words lean toward modesty and duty without losing a taste for beauty. The law and the song share a spine. In a room nearby, scribes sit with backs straight and hair bound, faces marked with the patience of people who spend their hours turning sound and world into picture and sign. They grind hematite into a wet rust and mix it with plant gum. They bruise cochineal to a deep crimson that dries like fruit in sun. They gather shell white and indigo blue until the bowls look like a tray of sky at different hours. The Tlatelolco, painter of words and history, draws lines that knot time. A reed pen lays black, then red, then a bloom of blue, and the page acquires gravity. In the codex, the city becomes a thing that can be held, folded, opened, and passed from hand to hand. You watch a tribute page grow under a steady brush. Baskets of cacao stack in tidy clusters. Cotton mantles lie in neat rectangles. Quetzal feathers lift like small flames held still. Numbers are carried by dots and flags so that a reader whose mouth knows the count can feel each burden. A lord's glyph sits beside a town hill sign. A river twists in blue at the edge, showing the path that goods must travel. The page becomes a contract without a signature, so clear that no one needs to shout. Later, men will copy such pages into works that bear names outsiders give them, and the memory of what was owed and paid will outlive many bodies. Another screenfold opens to show rulers walking in ordered procession, each step framed by mats and speech scrolls. A boy traces the path with his finger and learns that time in his country does not only move forward. It opens like a book and can be read from 3 directions until understanding settles in the spine. A girl copies a glyph for water and fire joined. Her brush trembles at the curl that turns 2 powers into a single braid. She looks pleased when the curve holds. A poet enters carrying a small drum. He sits by the door and sets the pace of his voice to the skin's taut whisper. He sings of flowers and song, in Xochitl and Cuicatl, as if beauty were not decoration, but a vessel for truth. His lines praise those who keep the measure in markets and courts. They offer balm for ears that have listened all day to numbers and disputes. He speaks of breath as a loan that must be repaid with gratitude. He calls jade precious and still more precious the time in which one can sing. The listeners smile without breaking their tasks. Work receives the poem and becomes less heavy. A clean fact rests its weight in the mind. Codices grow on bark paper and deerskin, bound into screenfolds that open like small theaters of memory. Tribute rolls, dynastic lists, festivals, maps that are more than maps. They live in temples and palaces. They travel with ambassadors who need to show rather than explain. They are painted as much as written because the hand and the eye together persuade faster than the tongue alone. The city trusts its picture of itself enough to give it a body made of fiber and paint. You step into a school where boys chant the calendar and copy place signs with careful strokes. The teacher taps a reed on the mat and points to a glyph for flint, to one for house, to one for rabbit. The class repeats the shapes in a hum that sounds like bees. In another room, a stern voice recites offenses and their weights so that the knowledge of lines and limits sinks in early. The learning is not harsh, it is exact. A city like this feeds precision to its children and harvests order from their adulthood. At midday, a judge crosses the market and the lanes bend around him like water around a canoe. He stops at a stall where a scale looks tired and replaces the stone counterweight with a fresh one. He says little. The seller nods and breathes easier. A woman petitions for a boundary line beside a chinampa path that has shifted under floods. A scribe draws the bed's edges with 4 clean strokes and writes the names of the neighbors at the corners. The dispute loses heat and becomes a figure the eye can accept. The page will live in a chest where papers lie cool and still until someone needs to remember again. In the shade, the poets gather to trade verses like weavers who compare patterns. One recites lines that lift the face with the thought that life is brief yet sweet. Another praises a ruler's wisdom in ordering aqueducts and gardens, and he laces his praise with a suggestion that mercy ties the knot tighter than fear. A third sings of a butterfly that lands on a soldier's hand before a battle and refuses to leave, as if reminding him to carry gentleness inside iron. The city lets these words into its blood the way it allows clear water into canals. Law without song would turn to stone. Song without law would wander and forget to return. A soft uncertainty threads the afternoon. Some say the poems attributed to famous rulers come from many mouths and were gathered under a single name so they could travel farther. Some wonder how widely people learned to read beyond the schools of priests and scribes, since markets already spoke such fluent order without letters. Others hint that the tribute books we can still touch were copied after foreigners arrived, carrying faces and faiths that changed how memory dressed itself. The codices that vanished into fire are felt like rooms still warm though their lamps have gone out. What remains is enough to guide a hand across the page and across the day. Evening brings a glow to plaster that makes walls look like sheets of soft metal. The court finishes its list with a last case about a damaged canoe and a debt paid in chilies and labor. The scribe lifts his brush and blows gently on a red line until it dries. He folds the screen and ties it with a cord the color of willow bark. The judge bows his head toward a small household altar and steps out into the lane where vendors are closing their trays with the contentment of accounts balanced. You walk along a canal while an old singer hums the final lines of a song about breath returning to the dark and names returning to flowers. A young apprentice cradles a bundle of blank paper like a child and smiles, because tomorrow's pages feel like fields waiting for rain. The lake gathers late light and tucks it under its skin. You pass a doorway where a reed mat hangs, and a simple glyph marks a family's name with affection rather than pride. The city's story rests in chests and in throats. It rests in rules that make morning predictable and in verses that make evening gentle. The codices sleep. The courts sleep. The poets sleep. The breath of Tenochtitlan settles into a rhythm that will carry through the night without hurry. You follow a messenger along the causeway at first light. His steps quick yet even, the painted staff in his hand flashing when the sun finds it between willow leaves. The lake lies flat and dark on both sides, a polished path for canoes that move with the same steady pulse. Ahead, the road meets the mainland and splits into routes that climb toward hills, run beside rivers, and disappear into hot lands where parrots speak in green. The Empire wakes each day along these lines. Tribute rides them. News rides them. Resolve rides them. You pass a toll point marked with a low platform and a woven screen. Inspectors sit with shell counters and small cords, their mantles clean, their eyes calm. Goods arrive in ranks and piles. Cotton mantles breathe a dry smell like sun-warmed cloth. Baskets of cacao whisper when shifted, a sound that feels like distant rain. Rubber balls sit heavy and dull, ready to be born into spring and game. Quetzal feathers glow with a cool fire that seems to lift the air. Salt cakes stack like pale bricks. Gold dust sleeps in quills with a secret gravity. Jaguar skins throw shadows that look like moving leaves. A scribe paints neat marks to remember each burden, and the page gathers weight without strain. Tamies balance loads with a shoulder yoke and a patient walk that measures distance better than any string of numbers. Relay runners, Painani quick as hawks, wait at stations where a pot of cool water, a handful of maize, and a clean mat always stand ready. A message leaves the valley at dawn and meets the coast before the next dawn, moving through mouths and feet that belong to the state as much as to themselves. You feel a hum in this system, a contained music that lets the capital speak to towns beyond the ridges without raising its voice. The tribute cycle has a shape a farmer would respect. Lists are carved into memory and into paint. Towns send what they weave, mine, hunt, or grow according to place and season and treaty. Inspectors called Calpixque know who is late and who is generous. A further layer, Tlatelolco, mine the warehouses where goods lie, cool in the company of other goods, each bundle tied with a knot that means a number and a promise. When the granaries open, the math of empire becomes dinner, pay, ritual, and the soft luxury that makes poets reach for richer blue and finer green. You join a small convoy that heads east along a ridge road no wider than a careful choice. The city behind you shrinks to a glint on water. Ahead, pine and oak cast stripes across the path. In gullies, you hear water talk. On higher flats, the wind carries the dry sweetness of maguey and resin. At way stations, old men pour you a little drink made from cacao and maize and share a word about the road ahead. The empire keeps the stops clean, the jars filled, the mats dusted. It is a small courtesy that holds a big machine together. A market in the foothills receives the convoy with a voice like surf. Not all goods here are tribute. Paxteca walk the lanes in mantles that fall with a certain practiced dignity. They travel far and know prices that change with rain and rumor. Their guilds hold secrets that are not written, a map made of hands and faces and promises. Some say the Paxteca serve the state with eyes as well as with baskets, listening at gates, counting spears, learning where salt runs short and where a lord grows tired. Others see only merchants who keep their own laws and prefer profit over politics. Both truths may live under the same mantle. You watch a Paxtecatl negotiate for a heap of fine cotton while his apprentice inspects threads with a respectful pinch. He pays in cacao and in words that promise habit. The seller nods at the thought of steady buyers and steady justice. Later, the guild will host a feast at its house with clay cups set in long rows and a song for those who returned from long, hot roads. The Paxteca honor their patron Yakatecutli with bundles bound and set upright, as if to remind everyone that a traveler's staff stands in the room even when the room feels safe. Facts come in quietly and take their places. The empire's tribute is not only a tax, it is a web that holds distant towns in the same story. Cotton from the hot lands lets Tenochtitlan clothe its nobles in a softness that matches their rank. Cacao buys attention and friendship in a market that understands the sound of beans. Salt keeps fish and meat honest for the chinampa kitchens. Feathers and shells travel into ritual and art that teach awe. The road brings coarse and fine together until the plaza feels like a map in motion. Yet along the edges of this order, a soft wondering persists. How fixed were the quotas when harvest failed? How often did inspectors bend rules to keep a peace that could have broken? How often did Paxteca carry messages that were not priced but weighed by risk and favor? A codex shows clean piles and neat dots, while mouths remember days when a storm or a pride turned a column into a quarrel. The truth wears both faces because the empire lived in both book and breath. By midday, you walk with a squad of couriers returning to the city. One carries a bundle of painted slips bound with a cord dyed blue. Another bears a pouch of jade beads that will balance a ledger in the palace. A third sings softly to hold his pace. The road dips to cross a stream by a crib of logs set to keep feet dry. The city has not laid a single stone from coast to capital like the spine roads of other empires, yet it has taught dozens of paths to behave, to welcome feet, to carry weight. Bridges are simple and many. Crossings are known and kept. Where causeways meet land, guards stand with spears leveled at the size of a crowd rather than at its heart. At the edge of the valley, you meet a patrol that wears mantles trimmed with jaguar spots. Their captain signs a short report to the courier with his chin. There was a theft near a granary and a punishment near a shrine, and both have cooled. The patrol moves on. The couriers move on. You move on. And the afternoon turns the causeway white underfoot. Canoes tow canoes in lines of 5, like families joined by a rope. You smell the lake before you see it, the mineral breath and the wet grass and the old sweetness of rotting reed that means life does not waste itself here. You enter the tribute house, where mats cover the floor and stacks of goods rise to a man's shoulder. Clerks sit with brushes and speak a language that sounds like steady rain. A supervisor lifts the corner of a mantle to judge the weave. Another counts feather bundles by touch, each knot a promise kept. The room holds no hurry, only pressure that keeps shape. Outside, boys unload baskets and joke as if weight were only something to be taught to the body while it was young. The palace receives part, the temples receive part, the army receives part, the market receives part. Gifts move to altars and return as blessing. Pay moves to captains and returns as patrol and banner. Surplus moves to warehouses and returns when clouds forget their duty. A circle closes each month and opens again with the same quiet swing. In this turning, the empire finds a calm that feels like a drumbeat under conversation. You pause at a painted screenfold spread on a low bench. It shows towns with their hill signs and rivers, each sending its due to the lake capital. A figure of the ruler sits at the center, wearing the turquoise diadem that glints like a cold star. Around him, the goods form a ring with neat spaces, as if tribute were a crown made of cotton and cacao and fire-bright feathers. A young scribe adds a mark for today's deliveries and blows gently so the paint sets. The page seems to breathe. Evening puts copper on the causeways and violet under the willows. A last relay runner arrives, shoulders shining with sweat, and drinks in 3 long swallows from a gourd that smells of clay and water. He smiles without speaking and lies on a mat with his forearm over his eyes. A Pochteca passes with an apprentice and a load of shells that still shine with the memory of waves. Somewhere, a judge closes a small case about a short measure of salt. Somewhere, a priest places a plume at the foot of a stair so the god will see that distant towns remember the center. The day's traffic settles into stillness like silt into a canal corner. You sit by the lake and listen to a quiet that holds the memory of footsteps. The empire has taught roads to behave and goods to travel without anger. It has made the distance between mountain and market into a habit. It has given the lake 1,000 small reasons to welcome boats each morning. In the dark, torches move like slow fish along the causeways. The tribute sleeps under woven covers. The messengers sleep with lightness ready in their legs. The city sleeps with a full pantry and a steady breath. Tomorrow, the same paths will wake, and the same hands will lift, and the same lists will grow, and the great machine will hum again without hurry. Before dawn, the schools wake like 2 lungs drawing a single breath. On one side of the city stands the Comicac, where sons of nobles learn to carry time itself, voices tuned to the calendar, and hands trained to ritual and command. On the other side stands the Tlatelolco, the house of youth, where common-born boys learn endurance that makes spears honest and shields steady. You step first into the Tlatelolco courtyard and feel cool stone underfoot. A line of boys runs silent loops around a square lit by torches that gutter at the edges. Breath clouds the air. Sandals whisper. A captain counts in a low voice that steadies pace without hurrying anyone past what the body can hold. The Tlatelolco teaches the weight of simple things. A boy shoulders firewood and carries it from shrine to barracks until arms tremble and then smooth out. Another lifts a jar of water and holds it until his hands learn to obey beyond comfort. The macahuitl rests on a rack nearby, a wooden blade edged with obsidian that shines like cooled night. The atlatl sits beside it, a short lever that turns the arm into a longer arm and sends darts fast and straight. In a corner lies the ichkahuipili, quilted cotton armor that looks humble and proves faithful when obsidian bites. A shield's rim smells faintly of resin and paint. Each tool waits in quiet confidence, as if sure the day will ask for it. Across the city, the Comicac rings a conch, and you cross a canal to join that slower rhythm. Here, boys move through prayers with eyes down and backs straight. A priest instructs them in songs that tie stars to months and months to ceremonies. They learn to measure words, so dancers step together and offerings arrive in the right color and number. They memorize names of lords, towns, and lineages, so messages can travel without getting lost between chief and captain. When they practice with weapons, their bodies keep the same careful precision. Every stroke a syllable, every block the closing of a line. The city's two schools are not rivals. They are partners that share a spine. You feel that spine when squads from both houses meet in a wide plaza at mid-morning. The instructors lay out targets of reed bundles. A runner plants a standard with a hummingbird crest so the wind can flirt with it. Drums begin a dry heartbeat. The boys form ranks, cotton armor laced, shields on the left, clubs and darts in right hands. They advance, pause, cast, advance again. The Atlatl answers with a soft thrum as darts fly. The Macuahuitl cuts the air in slices that sound like reeds parting. A captain calls a change, and the front line swaps with the second without breaking rhythm. Even the pauses feel like steps. You sit beside a pile of painted roundels and watch a herald explain the meaning sewn and painted upon them. A flint shows resolve. A rabbit shows speed. A water curl with fire tongue, Tlatelolco, reminds the boys that struggle purifies and creates. Nearby, an older soldier tends the crest of a Quachik, an elite who once swore never to retreat. His mantle bears marks that tell stories without a mouth. He glances at the youth with a face both stern and kind, as if holding two truths at once. The road is hard. The road is worthy. When the sun climbs higher, captains arrange a mock drill that tastes of campaign without bitterness. Scouts lope out along the causeway and return with hand signs about reeds and turns. Runners carry a command to the left wing whose leader answers with a whistle. The Atlatl line sends a cloud forward that strikes the reed bundles with a patter like heavy rain. Then the shield wall advances 3 steps, stops, and sings a short phrase that keeps feet together. From a distance, the movement looks like a field breathing. A clean fact takes its place. Boys trained in Kamakac and Telpachkali learn to seek glory through capture more than through killing, since captives feed ceremonies that keep the calendar's teeth from dulling. You feel the weight of that sentence settle without sharpness. In the training yard, it lives as a way of moving. Hands learn grips, feet learn angles, eyes learn to judge when force should turn to restraint. The lesson asks the heart to hold heat and control in the same cup, and the teachers keep pouring until the cup can bear it. Toward afternoon, you cross the lake's light to the borderlands of meaning where flower wars bloom. Xochiaoyotl, the people call them. Battles agreed upon with folk-kin whose names are old in the mouth. Tlaxcala, Huejotzingo, Cholula. You stand on a meadow that smells of crushed grass and sage. Standards meet standards. Lines align with a care that feels ceremonial. Drums speak, flutes answer, and feet begin their work upon the earth. In the air hangs a fragrance of marigold and copal, as if the field were both court and altar. From the sideline, you taste the strangeness these encounters carry. The aims are narrower than in a campaign. Towns agree to meet. Captains seek personal valor. The taking of opponents becomes a proof of skill and a gift to the gods who stand behind both banners. Warriors call out names across the gap like men greeting cousins at a wedding, and then close with energy that hums. Obsidian flashes, shields ring, bodies grapple, and then a man is led away with hands bound and head high. There is pride in restraint, pride in the clean capture, pride in playing by rules that teach the city to praise courage without letting cruelty spill. The drums keep time. The sun watches. You hear 3 soft explanations share the field. Some say these wars train youth where sweat has the right weight and risk has the right bite. Some say they maintain an economy of honor and obligation across old frontiers, a way to test each other's mettle while preserving the larger balance. Some say they secure lives for ceremonies that renew the world's breath, since harvests and calendars ask for offerings as surely as fields ask for water. The field does not choose a single answer. It holds all 3 like a braid that only looks simple from far away. A captain kneels beside a youth who trembles with the energy of his first clean capture. He speaks quietly about balance and breath, about bravery that keeps its voice low, about the city that waits at home, counting on men who can master both heat and measure. The boy's eyes steady. The veteran ties a bright feather to his shield rim, a small sun that will teach his hand to remember this day. Around them, pairs of fighters circle, advance, clinch, release. The sight lacks frenzy. It carries gravity. You sense how a people so in love with ritual pours even its contest into forms that produce memory rather than rubble. As evening folds over the meadow, both sides draw back with a courtesy that tastes like clean water. Captains trade short words that carry years of rivalry and respect. Standards lower, and the light catches their edges with a last gold. The lake receives boats in thin lines, and the city lifts its lamps in answer. You ride home under a sky the color of ground obsidian thinned with milk. The boys in your boat sit straight despite tired shoulders. They speak little. The day has taught them how to carry silence, too. In the Tlatelolco, cooks ladle stew into clay bowls and set stacks of tortillas on reed mats. Laughter returns in small pockets that do not disturb the calm. In the Comicac, a priest gives thanks for a day without disorder and places a paper flag by a small shrine to remind the night of the lessons learned. A drum speaks once, and once is enough. Somewhere an elite paints a thin line of blue across his face and ties a knot in his hair that marks a vow renewed. A final note enters without hurry. Scholars later will weigh the flower wars and find many seeds inside them. Some will see noble purpose and mutual schooling. Some will find a harder economy of power beneath the flowers. Some will hear both kinds of truth singing together, because the world often asks for more than one melody at a time. The field of grass holds all those songs. The city holds them too, and sleeps with the ease of a place that has given youth the skills to stand straight, step light, and let courage serve order. Night smooths the courtyards. Weapons rest on racks with a quiet pride. Shields lean against walls like moons in a row. Cotton armor dries on lines that smell of sun and sweat. The schools grow silent, yet the knowledge they planted keeps breathing in young chests. You lie down near an open doorway and feel the floor's cool welcome. Outside, the lake draws its own long breath and releases it. The city sleeps on a pillow of discipline and song, and the stars approve. You enter the palace in a season when silence feels heavy, as if the rooms carry a message that has not yet found a mouth. Moctezuma II holds the turquoise diadem with a careful gravity and lets its cool weight rest on his brow. He has inherited an empire that hums with tribute and order, a city that breathes through gardens and causeways and drums that keep the year's clean heartbeat. He watches the lake the way a priest watches the sky before dawn. His calm lives on the surface. Below it, thoughts move like fish that do not rise. At first light, he rises to bathe in water scented with herbs. He fasts often and speaks little before the sun has climbed a hand's width. He prays in chambers washed with lime and smoke and walks to the shrine with sandals that do not scuff. Maguey thorns and paper lie on a low tray for modest bloodletting offered with a steady hand. Messengers wait in shaded halls with painted staffs and eyes trained to notice the smallest change at the horizon. The palace feels tuned to a note most ears cannot hear. News arrives like a tremor that does not move the cup, yet shakes the hand that lifts it. Along the coast, fishermen speak of deer with two heads that breathe smoke and iron men whose skins shine like water in hard sun. Ships sit beyond the surf, taller than any house, their bellies full of voices and wood that remembers forests far away. Shell gatherers describe floating walls that sprout wings in a wind no one can see. The words cross the hills and walk the causeways until they stand in Moctezuma's room like patient guests who refuse to leave. He listens and sends gifts to the east. Gold discs travel in woven baskets. Featherworks shaped like the sun move in careful hands. He chooses speech that holds courtesy and distance at once. The palace scribes record answers on folded paper with pigment that dries to a deep, clean red. Couriers carry the letters with legs that know every rise and dip of the road. The city waits with the stillness of reeds before a wind. Portents begin to gather in people's mouths like a weather that refuses to be measured. A bright body crosses the night, leaving a white thread that seems to hum to itself as it fades. In another season, stones fall hot from sky to ground and lie hissing in dust until their anger cools. A small temple catches fire without a hand near the flame and burns with a speed that makes breath feel slow. Dancers stop and watch the blaze eat painted plaster as if the wall had learned to breathe and then chosen to let go. On a calm day, the lake shivers as if a giant hand had passed beneath it and brushed the chinampa roots with a single finger. In a room of polished stone, Moctezuma receives a heron with a mirror braced in its crown. He bends toward it and sees not his own face, but streets and walls and shapes that move with the angular confidence of strangers. He watches for a long time and then covers the bird's head with a cloth as if closing a codex. The attendant waits, breathing shallow. The ruler's gaze, when it lifts, holds both hunger for meaning and fatigue at its cost. A woman's cry slides along canals some nights, thin and long and sorrowful, a sound like wind in reeds taught to speak. She speaks of leaving. She speaks of children. Households tell each other they heard it too. Old men say the lake sometimes wears a voice when a change larger than boats and banners draws near. Priests sit with shells and paper and smoke and try to read the sound the way they read cloud and ash and the flight of birds. The palace keeps its lamps low and waits for the message inside the sound to rise. Facts steady the scene and give it edges the hand can touch. Moctezuma II took the diadem in the year we call 1502. He strengthened tribute lists and refined ceremonies with a precision that made markets calmer and courts clearer. He oversaw campaigns that pushed the empire's borders until the map of goods and obligations looked like a great net laid across valleys and coasts. When word came in 1519 that strangers had entered from the east with allies from old rival towns, he sent emissaries bearing gifts that showed power and grace together. He leans now over codices that paint earlier arrivals and earlier storms, hoping to read how a past ruler held his ground when the sky spelled new letters. He changes his mantle for one with fine blue and knots it without haste. He walks a corridor where turquoise mosaics blink with a shallow light like lizards at noon. He speaks with priests who fasted until their voices thinned, and with captains who have drilled boys until their feet learned to move without tripping the heart. Every counsel offers strength. None offers certainty, because certainty seldom lives in a palace when the horizon has learned a new color. In the Kalmakak, teachers present signs from the calendar with a quiet exactness. The count turns. Festivals hold their seats. Offerings go up the stairs on time. Yet the faces of the youths look older than their years, as if each had been given a new weight to carry that could not be set down in song. In the Telpakali, captains adjust drills to steady hands that pick up rumors as easily as atlatls. Obsidian shines with the same clean edge. Cotton armor hangs in neat lines to dry. The body is told to trust what it knows. Moctezuma visits Tlatelolco under a shade canopy, while inspectors test scales and vendors set out beans and cloth. The square still murmurs with fairness and the measured joy of trade. He studies the order as if it were a talisman. He speaks lightly with a feather merchant about a shipment that arrived in good shape despite hard rain in the foothills. He speaks with a judge about a boundary line that needs a fresh brush mark. He lets his eyes rest on baskets of cacao that stack like low dark hills. He smiles and the square breathes more easily, because the ruler has remembered that markets help the mind, and a ruler's mind helps the market. He returns to the palace and sits with old friends of state, men whose names sound like carved wood and cool water. Tlaquilo bring painted pages and lay them in a slow river across the floor. The pages show omens and victories and births and deaths at the same table. Moctezuma listens to a poem spoken softly about jade that breaks and breath that is lent only for a while. He nods at its truth and does not allow it to turn his heart to ash. He orders watch at the causeways to be firm and generous. He orders emissaries to the east to be quick and courteous. He orders prayers to be honest and unadorned. A quiet uncertainty lives in the walls and in the pages that later hands will write. Some will say these portents were seen as they are told, bright and exact, a sky and a lake speaking with human clarity. Some will say later years dressed old days with signs that gave sorrow a shape the heart could hold. Some will find natural causes for each wonder and still admit that meaning sometimes walks beside event like a twin whose face is hard to ignore. The palace does not force a single answer. It lets the mystery sit like a bowl of water that reflects whatever leans over it. Night folds itself around the precinct. The twin shrines breathe a slow heat that drifts down the stairs. In the quiet, Moctezuma walks a short length and then stands still and then walks again. He places a hand on stone that has known the touch of rulers who held crises of their own and kept their breath even. He allows himself one long exhale. He lights a small cup of copal and watches it lift its white thread into a darkness that feels gentle tonight. The city sleeps. The lake listens. The horizon keeps its secret, while the causeways wait for the sound of paddles at dawn. You stand on the eastern road, where dust tastes faintly of salt and new words ride the wind. Into this high country come men in skins that shine and animals that lift their front legs like dancers before they run. Steel glows at their hips with a cold light that mimics water but bites like flint. They carry thunder in tubes that cough smoke and fling pebbles with a scream that turns marrow to water. Between them walks a woman whose voice becomes a bridge that joins tongues. Marina, whom some call Malincine, hears one world and gives it to another with calm precision that steadies many hands. Her breath becomes a path the strangers learn to trust. You move among messengers who kneel, rise, and vanish toward the capital with eyes wide and faces composed. They bring news that feels like a stone lifted from a quiet pool. The newcomers accept food and send beads and bells. They ask for gold and maps and the names of towns that remember old grudges against the lake people. They bless wooden crosses. They set images of a mother and child where flowers already stand. They bow at altars with a gravity that confuses and impresses by turns. The road learns a new weight in a single season. In the foothills, Tlaxcala tests the visitors with a storm of darts and a wall of courage that holds until it learns what steel and horse can do together. The field smells of sage and iron. Obsidian shatters where it meets tempered edge. Cotton armor holds but cannot always keep teeth from ribs. The fight cools into parley. Old enemies of the Mexica weigh the newcomers and see a chance to rewrite maps with borrowed thunder and borrowed beasts. A pact takes shape under pine shade, bound by revenge and bright promises. Banners that once rose against the strangers now walk beside them with measured pride. Cholula lies ahead like a painted bowl, full of shrines and markets and old alliances. The air there tastes of incense and sweet dough. Streets run straight, courtyards wear neat shadows. You hear stories in 2 and 3 versions about what happened when the strangers entered the city. Some remember hidden weapons and plans to trap the visitors in narrow lanes. Some remember fear and preemption, with captains seizing the square to warn the basin that new rules had arrived. Fires rose and cries ran along walls with a speed that made flutes fall silent. When the smoke thinned, the road west felt heavier for every foot that put weight upon it. Facts settle like stones in the riverbed. In 1519, the expedition led by Hernando Cortés marched inland with Totonacs first, then with Tlaxcalans and other allies who measured old injuries with new hope. Marina's speech moved between tongues and taught agreements to stand. The march crossed rivers and climbed passes where breath shortens and mind sharpens. Gifts traded hands. Crosses rose where Ceiba and Willow had ruled the skyline. The strangers spoke of a single god and a single king across the sea whose face none here had seen. The basin heard and kept its pace. The lake greets the company at last. Water spreads like polished obsidian, cut into mirrors that reflect volcanoes and clouds. Causeways stride across shallows with the confidence of bridges that know they are needed. Canoes flicker. Markets rumble like distant surf that never breaks. Tenochtitlan rises from the water with stairs like sunlight and terraces like stacked gardens. Even the new men breathe as if they had walked into a painted book. A smell of flowers rides the breeze with a thread of wet stone. The city looks both delicate and invincible, a jewel that also knows how to be a fortress. You join the procession that moves onto the causeway under watchful eyes and measured drums. Nobles in mantles that fall like quiet rivers meet the company with words polished to shine without slipping. Moctezuma approaches in order that has been practiced for generations. Litter borne high, sandals clean, gaze steady. Gold glints at wrists and ankles. Turquoise winks from diadem and ear spools. He steps down to meet the captain, who wears steel and carries a banner stitched with a cross. For a breath, the lake seems to hold still. The ruler places garlands and places words that welcome without surrender. Cortés answers with a gift and a hand that tries to touch a world through silk and ritual. Marina stands near and keeps both worlds from losing face, her voice a narrow bridge over deep water. You walk between rows of houses that look like they were designed by a calm tide. Canals curl softly into courtyards. Gardens climb stone in terraces that smell of damp earth and crushed mint. Fish flash in pools. Vendors carry trays of sweets and cool drinks that foam. The newcomers look left and right as children do, Horses plant iron under hoof with a ring that draws stares and smiles and frowns and whispered prayers. Steel catches sun, feathers catch it better. A bell rings from a shrine with a voice that sounds like a bronze pedal being tapped. The palace offers rooms where lime shines under thin smoke and mats lie clean and cool. Gifts move between parties with a deliberation that feels like a ritual. Gold discs shaped like the sun circle rest on cloth. Feather mosaics lie in boxes like tame rainbows. The visitors bring beads and bright cloth and words of friendship and faith. Priests observe with eyes that measure how new images sit beside old gods. Captains observe with eyes that count walls, towers, storehouses, causeway cuts, and drawbridges that can blind the city's eyes at night. A simple, firm fact finds its seat at this table. On 8th of November 1519, by the count later used in Spanish, the Mexica ruler and the Castilian captain met on the causeway and then beneath the roofs of the water city. Their greetings were recorded in hands that painted glyphs and in hands that set black on white letters, and those records do not whisper the same tune. Both say the city was a marvel. Both say words that wore friendship and challenge in the same garment. You notice how the marketplace receives the moment. Inspectors still check scales. Judges still weigh disputes. Cacao still whispers when poured from bowl to bowl. Yet voices drop when a horse passes. Faces turn when a man in iron holds up a mirror to admire his beard. Children count the buttons on a doublet and then count again. A featherworker touches a steel knife and smiles at its stubborn sheen while thinking in silence about obsidian's quick light. Awe and appraisal share a bench. Night slows the city without smoothing its knots. The visitors sleep in rooms watched by guards who know exactly where every door opens and every stair ends. The palace breathes. The lake listens. Torches burn with a quiet hiss. In inner chambers, council moves in circles that try to find a place where welcome and strength can lie in the same bed. Moctezuma feeds the guests and feeds his gods with equal care. Cortes writes letters that will ride back along dust and foam to a king who stares at maps. Marina sits apart for a time and lets her mind cool before tomorrow's words must carry weight again. A gentle uncertainty stands in the doorway without entering. Some say Moctezuma's courtesies hid a plan to measure and then strike when the visitors were fat with comfort. Some say the ruler tried to absorb the strangers into a web of gift and honor that would hold them as it held other lords. Some say he feared a prophecy's shadow and read these men as actors in a script old as his great-grandfather's. The truth keeps several candles lit. Shadows move with each flame. Yet the room stays bright enough to see two leaders who walk the same tiled floor and breathe the same cool lake air while carrying different maps inside their minds. You step to the edge of a terrace and look over the canals at lamps floating like small stars in slow constellations. The twin shrines of the Templo Mayor hold their dark lines against a sky that drinks moonlight in small sips. Somewhere a conch answers a drum once and then is silent. The city rests, yet you can feel the lake tug under the causeways as if an unseen hand were testing each knot. It is a patient touch. It is persistent. You lie down on a mat and let the faint smell of copal and aloe sit with you. The night is gentle. The edge of it is not. Morning will bring words, gifts, gestures, and the first thin threads of a web that will tighten into siege and sorrow. For now, the water city floats under its own stars and under new eyes that gleam in the lamplight. Rain gathers on the eaves in a long patience that remembers mountains. Inside the palace, the air tastes of lime and smoke and sleep held at arm's length. Days have turned into a careful theater that balances gifts and watch and the slow gathering of motives like clouds along a ridge. Then a sound cuts the cloth of habit. Drums in the temple quarter pick up a bright, clean rhythm for the Feast of Toxcatl, the season when youth wears the image of Tezcatlipoca and moves through the city with a quiet majesty. Flowers open along thresholds. Copal burns in shallow bowls. Dancers step into the plaza with ankle shells that murmur like small waves finding stone. In the palace, the visitors listen and choose caution over courtesy. Their captain leaves the city to meet new enemies and opportunities on the coast, placing command in hands that do not sing the local songs. The festival's center draws a hard eye. Soldiers enter the square with iron that shines like old water under moon. The music falters, then breaks. Blades lift. Blood steams in morning light. The hush that follows is not silence. It is a city holding its breath so tightly that walls remember it later. Word runs along canals and alleys the way rain runs along a roof edge before it leaps. The water city learns a new sound for rage. Streets narrow into jaws. The visitors retreat to the palace where walls become a second pair of ribs. Watchers climb roofs and throw down stone and fire. Sling bullets hum like bees awakened in anger. The great drum on the temple beats with a fury that makes the chest ache. Messengers push through the crush to Moctezuma, who sits in rooms where smoke curls into fragile threads and painted pages lie heavy with meaning. He speaks to the strangers with the voice he uses for storms. Peace finds no purchase. Hunger enters. A siege closes like a hand. Days blur into a rhythm of rationed water and measured arrows. The causeways that once promised freedom now carry barricades and eyes that do not blink. Canoes patrol the cut bridges and shadowed gaps. The palace courts smell of sweat and brass and roasted maize that does not satisfy. At night, the city sings from rooftops with a power that turns the dark into a living thing. In the rooms where the ruler's diadem rests, words still try to shape outcomes. The stones outside only listen to force. A moment arrives heavy with the ache of dignity. Moctezuma stands on a roof under a sky the color of first clay and speaks down to his people. He wears the turquoise and the calm that once moved markets. He asks for quiet so parley can breathe. Stones answer where words cannot reach. A bruise spreads. A wound deepens. The ruler is carried inside. In some tellings, he dies later by hands that feared his temper shifting. In others, he dies from the stones of those who once bent the knee. In every telling, the room cools, and a name that weighed like a mountain becomes a silence that weighs the same. Facts place small anchors in the flood. The violence at Tenochtitlan happened in late spring of 1520. The siege of the palace tightened over restless weeks. Moctezuma II died within that pressure, his end recorded in two scripts that disagree as if truth had two throats. The city chose Tlatelolco, a leader whose breath smelled of campfires and rain, and whose eyes carried the calm of a captain who has measured both victory and loss. He moved through the lanes with a presence that stiffened backs. The causeways began to think like traps. The lake turned steel under a sky that forgets to be gentle. A night of decision arrives. The visitors bind their loot with cords that bite shoulders. Allies from Tlaxcala stand in ranks tight as a woven mat. Rain begins as if the sky wished to erase the prints of what is about to happen. The palace opens its gates to darkness. Hooves ring on paving stones. Wheels gripe against wooden ruts. A line of bodies and burdens slips toward the causeway like a long animal that hopes not to wake the water. At the first bridge, the night rips open. Shell horns sound from canoes. Stones fall from terraces. Drums on the temple call down storms of hands. Arrows and darts write fast lines in rain. A gap in the causeway shows black mouth and teeth of piles. A portable bridge thuds into place and holds just enough for the first bodies to cross. Weight piles. Gold drags at belts and hearts. Men fall and carry metal to the bottom where soft mud turns greedy. Horses rear and slide. Canoes close like shoals of quick fish with eyes like flint. You move with the column as it stops, surges, stops again. A woman slips on a plank and takes a bundle with her that hisses when it meets water. A boy in armor that fits him poorly finds a hand and finds ground. A standard tips and then is righted by a shout that sounds like a prayer that forgot its God. In the rain, voices blur. Orders lose edges. The causeway's white surface disappears under shadows and bodies and glints of metal that do not belong to this lake. Canoes guide obsidian blades into gaps between wood and flesh. Sling stones strike with a flat sound that turns thought blank for an instant. The lake accepts weight without hurry. The wind carries a smell of wet reed and blood and wool and horses. A few reach the next gap where the portable bridge should be and find only water with slow circles growing outward. A plank is hauled. A door is torn from a house and laid. Men cross, fall, climb, and cross again. The lake remembers each step and keeps some for its own. A tree on the far bank receives men who have outrun the night's teeth. Bark smells of rain and sap and fear cooling under leaves. Faces lean against wood with eyes closed. The column thins. The first light drains the rain of its force. In later years, a story will fix on a single tree and call it a place where grief stopped to breathe. The truth tonight is more scattered and more complete. Every trunk along the road holds the print of a shoulder that carried more than a pack. The city's singers will keep this night in the mouth with a balance of anger and sorrow that refuses to slide into nothing. The newcomers will keep it with iron words that taste of loss sharpened into resolve. In both memories, the rain never truly stops. In both memories, the lake licks its lips. A soft uncertainty sits with you as the survivors count themselves and find numbers that do not rise high enough to comfort. How many drowned beneath gold? How many were cut on the causeway? How many allies fell in lanes and doorways far from any ledger? How much of what is called sorrow comes from grief at bodies, and how much from grief at pride that fooled hands into lifting more than they could carry? The answers do not stand still long enough to be weighed. They move like rain blown by crosswinds. You walk a little way from the road and sit where a ditch runs clear. The water tastes of stone and cedar. Far behind, the city's towers soften into mist. Far ahead, a hill waits where men will turn. Look back and teach their throats to become flint so that new plans can strike sparks. The lake settles to its old face. The causeways gleam with morning's thin mercy. The drum on the temple offers one last heartbeat that carries across water like a thought that refuses to die. Night gave its lesson and kept its fee. The road out cost more than any tribute list ever held. The rain erased some prints and preserved others in the mind where nothing washes clean. You lie on wet ground and feel the earth take your weight without complaint. The wind remembers flowers crushed in the first panic and carries a ghost of sweetness through the iron smell. The city behind breathes, wounded and unbroken. The road ahead breathes, haunted and hard. The lake lies between like a dark page turned without a sound. Binds the road a pale ribbon through pine and dust as allies gather their breath into purpose. In Tlaxcala, you move among sheds that smell of pitch and fresh shavings. Ribs of new boats rise from the ground like the frames of small houses. Axes answer adzes with a steady music. Smiths set bright rivets. Priests murmur over planks. Marina keeps bargains clear with even words that turn anger into labor. 13 hulls take shape for the lake that once fed the water city. The number settles in your bones like a counted prayer. Back in the basin, a quieter thunder has already begun. Fever walks the lanes with heat that climbs the face and settles into joints. It travels on breath and on touch. It powders skin with sores and leaves pits where beauty once lived. Mats hold bodies that cannot cool. Children sleep heavy. Elders look past the rafters as if listening for an old name. Quitlahuac wears the diadem with a captain's gravity, drills the guard, stirs the market to order and sends for herbs, yet the new fire will not obey. When he dies, the mantle passes to Cuauhtémoc, young and unbowed, a man shaped by camp smoke and rain. You walk the alleys and see chinampa edges torn for barricades. Stakes choke canals. Stone and timber block bends where canoes once kissed the corners. Drawbridges rise and lash shut like eyelids that refuse sleep. The aqueduct's clean arc lies cut, so thirst must learn to live beside water it cannot drink. Sling stones fill baskets to the lip. Obsidian blades wait in neat rows. Women grind the last good maize and save the finest flour for mouths that must command. Children carry jars with arms that learn a tremor before their time. Priests lift copal and send white threads to a sky that answers with long silence. Spring opens with sails. The brigantines slide down greased channels and find the lake with a shiver that sounds like teeth setting in wood. Their sides carry wooden mouths that spit iron stones and smoke. Their decks hold men who learn to lean with the hull rather than fight it. Canoes dart from reed shadow with the old confidence, then wheel away under thunder they cannot still. From the causeways you watch the new craft turn water into a board that another hand now plays with patient, ruthless strokes. Day by day the ring tightens. Causeway cuts widen. Bridges break and are reset and break again. Streets turn trench. Roofs learn to rain stone and fire. The brigantines herd canoes, rake platforms, guard the gaps, and make the lake an ally for the strangers. Wells taste of mud. Throats burn. The market at Tlatelolco whispers instead of roars. Weights and measures sleep beside scales that no longer move. The city eats leather softened to broth and the white hearts of reeds, and still the hunger sharpens faces into edges. Facts arrive with cool hands. Smallpox struck the basin in 1520 and carried off numbers no page can hold without shaking. Cuitlahuac died in that season. Cuauhtémoc took the burden. In the spring of 1521, 13 brigantines were carried from Tlaxcala and launched on Lake Texcoco to cut supply, patrol the causeways, and break the city's water roads. By summer, the siege had pressed markets to silence. By mid-August, the lake capital could hardly stand. You walk with a squad along a lane that smells of ash and brackish water. A woman boils sandals to soften them into food. A boy chews a strip of maguey until his jaw slackens. A man lifts a child whose fever will not listen to cool cloth. In the same lane, a guard fixes a ragged standard and ties a fresh quetzal plume to its rim, as if to feed the eye what the belly cannot have. A priest paints a water curl joined to a tongue of flame on a lintel, atl with tlaquinoli, and presses 2 fingers to the mark so the symbol will remember the hand that made it. At the lake's edge, canoes launch from shade with quick strokes and strike a brigantine like short, hard words. Hooks fly, ropes bite. Brave hands find rail and beam. The boat backs, wheels, and rams. Arrows lift and fall like dark rain. Men slip into the water and do not return. The lake closes over faces that once laughed in markets. Courage does not thin, it changes shape. It lowers its voice and learns patience. Inside the precinct, Cuauhtémoc speaks in few lines. His mantle hangs loose on a frame narrowed by the siege. His eyes count only what can still be done. He orders dawn sallies to cut siege towers. He orders night crews to clear lanes and rehang bridges. He orders quiet prayers so the breath wasted on panic can feed work. The young follow because he walks as if complaint would cost a roof. The old follow because his calm reminds them of mornings that survived harder storms than memory admits. A softness of mystery moves through the edges. How deeply did the fever bend the fight before iron and wind could finish the work? How far did hunger go in teaching knees to fold where pride kept them straight? How many towns on the ridges chose silence because old hurts asked for quiet revenge? The siege is a web of threads that cross and cross again until no hand can trace a single clean line through the whole. The weeks grow ash-colored. Houses fall inward. Gardens turn to dust. Dogs vanish from lanes and then return in stories as the meal that held a family one more day. The great drum in the temple counts dawns without pomp. A singer tries a verse and stops at the second line, as if the air itself were too thin for melody. Smoke lies low as if afraid to be seen. The city's breath goes shallow and pauses between sips. Then a morning holds its note. Defenses along the western quarters fold, then along the north. A small company guides a canoe through floating rubble with the last ruler seated within, sweat and wood ash striping his face, jaw set as if it could keep the lake still by strength alone. Brigantines close like hawks. Hands seize the gunwales. Cuauhtémoc stands. He offers his body without tremor. He asks for an end that suits a captain. The words carry far enough to shame a few faces and harden others. A blade does not rise. The man is taken alive while the lake breathes around the boat as it has breathed for centuries. The date fixes itself like a pin through cloth. The city yields in mid-August of 1521 after 3 moons of siege and a year that had already burned through names and bodies. The plaza does not cheer. It exhales. The survivors sit where they stand. Water dulls to tin. The twin shrines keep their dark edges against a sky that has forgotten how to be blue. You walk the lanes in the long evening. Walls are scraped by hands that carried stones all summer. Doorways wear smoke like old mourning. The scent of marigold has given way to wet ash. Yet on a step you find a single thread of turquoise fallen from a mantle, still bright, still cool to the touch. A woman sweeps a threshold with the care of a temple keeper. A child draws a small glyph in soot, a water curl, and a flower. Memory gathers itself like a broken reed woven back into a mat that can still carry weight. Night comes without celebration. The lake holds the stars in a tired mirror. Somewhere a conch speaks once, and the note is low and kind. You lie near a doorway where air moves gently and feel the ground receive your weight like the palm of a hand. The breaking is complete. The silence that follows is not empty. It is a room where names will still be said and seeds will still be saved for morning. In the quiet after breaking, you move through streets that have become lines on a palm newly read. Stone lies in careful heaps. Smoke lingers in places where the sun cannot quite reach. Canoes drift without voices, their prows touching walls as if asking old doors to open. The city exhales and waits. Across the lake, ridges hold their breath. In the plaza, figures in iron and cloth speak to builders with gestures that are still learning each other. New walls rise on old footings. New prayers test air that remembers copal and flower. You walk, and the ground tells you that names do not end where buildings end. The strangers measure with cords and set a cross where two great lines meet. Their gods arrive on carts that rattle like distant thunder, and their bells speak a round bronze language. A church climbs from stone that once lifted a shrine. The old temple's layers become steps into a new house. Some blocks show the faint ghost of a carving rubbed smooth by many hands. The city learns a new center without forgetting where the last axis stood. You rest your palm on a wall still warm from the sun and feel both songs humming under the plaster. Water changes costume. Causeways remain, but learn to carry hooves and wheels. Canals close in segments. Streets dry and wear dust like new skin. Yet south of the great squares, fields continue to float. In Xochimilco and beyond, willows drink, reeds whisper, and chinampas hold their lines against time's pull. Farmers guide canoes through green corridors, dredge rich mud, and press seeds into beds with the same tenderness their grandmothers used. Maize lifts a patient yellow. Amaranth glows like a small dawn. Flowers spill color into baskets headed for altars that carry different saints and the same human wish for a listening sky. Voices settle into habits that feed memory through the ear. Nahuatl continues in kitchens and markets and lullabies. Words like atl and kali and cuicatl move through rooms where Latin syllables have just begun to sleep. Names lengthen with new endings and still keep their roots. A boy learns to sign himself with two languages and feels pride grow where some would plant shame. He copies a glyph of water and then a letter A and watches both look back at him with recognition. Your own tongue becomes a small bridge that lets you walk between rooms without knocking. A handful of painted books survive the way seeds survive a fire, small and stubborn in the ash. Codices cross new oceans in chests with iron corners, and others sleep in monasteries where monks take time to learn the grammar of pictures. Many pages vanish into flames, the crackle a sound that will never lose its sting. Yet hands remember how to paint a river, how to bind tribute in dots and flags, how to mark a lineage with a mat and a speaking scroll. Scribblecraft leans into the new alphabet and teaches it to carry old music. A friar sits with an elder and asks for words that mean flower, jade, truth. The elder smiles and begins with breath itself. Facts step in gently and stand beside you like quiet companions. Cuauhtémoc endures until 1525, taken on a long road south where rain turns thick and green. He meets an end in a forest that does not say his name aloud. Over decades, the Water City folds into the plan of a colonial capital, called by a name that will slowly learn to carry both maps. Churches bloom, palaces adjust their courtyards to new standards, markets rise again on squares that still remember order. The old gods do not disappear. They move, soften, and sometimes put on new faces so that faith can keep its promises to grandmothers. A craftsman fits turquoise into a wooden cross with the care once given to a mask for a god of rain. A featherworker sews a mantle for procession that stops at a doorway where an elder sprinkles water and murmurs words that have known more than one sky. Bells ring, and somewhere a conch answers out of habit and love. The city learns to bow without breaking. In kitchens, nopal paddles hiss on griddles, cacao froths in tall cups, and chilies sing their clean heat into stews that taste like memory, turning into tomorrow. At the edge of the old precinct, workers uncover stone with a carved curve that looks like a moon sleeping. Coyolxauhqui's battered beauty returns today, and people gather to see the fragment that proves a story did not vanish when a wall did. Children trace the spiral with their fingers and blink as if their own skins had remembered something useful. Far beneath, other rooms wait. The ground is not finished speaking. Each generation will ask a new question with a trowel or a brush, and the city will answer by degrees. A clean emblem rises over centuries into a banner the wind enjoys, an eagle and a cactus, talons set where stone once shouldered itself out of water. The sign that began a lake kingdom becomes the coat of arms of a nation whose roads reach far beyond the basin. The bird's eye still looks right through you, calm and sure. The cactus still holds its red fruit like coals. You feel how beginnings travel with people, even when streets change and waters recede. A flag can be a memory taught to fly. In markets that never truly died, you hear old rhythms under new songs. Cacao still rings softly in bowls, though coins clink louder. Cotton breathes against skin. Shells shine like small moons in trays near saints whose faces smile with a serenity the lake would understand. Judges speak in new courts with pens that scratch like cicadas and still aim for the same steady balance. Poets write with letters and conjure flowers with ink the way their grandfathers did with brushes and ground cochineal. A boy recites, "Not forever on earth, only a little while," and his teacher nods, because a line can hold a city like a jar can hold a river's water for one pure sip. A quiet uncertainty rests its head beside your own. How much of the old law lived under the new robes? How much of the empire's language hid in kitchens and doorways and then returned wearing Sunday clothes? How many pages that burned carried stories we were meant to keep? The answers change like light on plaster walls. Morning and evening paint different truths. What does not change is the way a people learns to survive by teaching breath to flow through both sorrow and work. Evening slips across the valley. The volcanoes wear shawls of cloud. South, in Chinampa country, a farmer pulls a narrow canoe through water the color of old jade. Flowers ride in baskets toward a market that will open at dawn. In the city center, bells fold the day and let the night open like a book. You stand near a wall that holds two histories and lay your palm on its face. The stone is warm. It remembers reeds and drums. It remembers organs and Latin hymns. It remembers feet moving up and down with burdens for gods and for saints, and it remembers laughter that does not care which name blessed the bread. You breathe. The lake breathes slower now, but it still answers. You listen to voices layered like plaster coats, each protecting the next from wind and time. A lullaby in Nahuatl floats from a doorway and carries across a square where light falls in squares of honey. A child answers sleep with trust. The city closes its eyes while keeping one open in dream. You understand the truth that keeps old names alive. The empire fell, and the people did not. Memory has learned to build like a chinampa, layer on layer, reed and mud and root, until a garden stands where water once seemed to say no. Night drapes the valley in slow velvet, and lights along the old lake edge soften to gentle pearls. Air cools. Roofs release the day's heat like a long sigh. Gardens remember hands and prayers and settle. Somewhere a door closes with the kindness of felt, and sandals whisper across swept thresholds. A fountain keeps its small promise in a courtyard, carrying the voices of water to ears that have earned quiet. You drift along a canal that has forgotten hurry, past willows leaning like elders who have chosen listening over speech. On Chinampas, rows fall into shadow and become simple bands, dark and tender. The earth holds the day's footprints without complaint. A heron lifts, then settles again, unwilling to disturb a calm that finally fits. The city, layered and patient, loosens its belt and leans back into itself. Stones that once bore drums now hold the soft weight of night. Bells lose their metal and keep only their hush. Across walls, painted saints and old gods meet in silence and nod as neighbors who have learned to share a garden path. Words fold. Names sleep. Breath lengthens. Somewhere, a mother hums a melody that crossed centuries to find the same note. The tune is simple and sure, a line that knows where to set its feet. A child's breathing evens under the song, and you feel your own follow. The sky wears a handful of careful stars. The lake, even smaller lights, doubled in water. You lie down where cool air moves without edge, and the world becomes kind in small ways. The weight of a blanket, the clean grain of a mat, the faint scent of flowers set in a clay cup. Memory loosens its hand and keeps only warmth. Stories close like shutters. The city grows light as a boat unmoored, and now you may drift into dreams of history. End of script. Sweet dreams.